Yeah, that's all right.
No.
I mean,
There we go.
right?
Remember, none of the evidence that they extended to 2AC, that was read the 2AC extended to 1AR is about their plan at all. All of it is just generic arguments about why the government has to intervene. If we win the specificity our link claims about, which are all specific to restoration, rehabilitation, the Endangered Species Act. These are the reasons why you should prefer our evidence. The permutation is impossible. All of our link arguments prove this to be the case. There's no benefit of the permutation anyway. If it all tells all the case, they've conceded that it necessarily does. And they don't have any arguments at all in the 2AC, anything about our Heideggerian alternative besides some generic theoretical PIMs. If we win the alternative solves all the case, then any risk of a link is the reason why you should vote negative. I will do all of our link work here. First is that their idea of the environment somehow us is external to the environment, somehow objective is exactly what justifies environmental control manipulation. Our evidence, our Luke evidence indicates that mismanagement will necessitate things like the environmental collapse, which is obviously a reason why the permutation is doomed to solve. Subpoint B is our predictions link argument. They've conceded our Jordarian evidence indicates these predictions ultimately doomed to fail. This is also coupled with our science evidence, which indicates the science is not objective or true, but rather is informed by particular cultural suppositions. When they make arguments in the 1AR about why we have to infuse things like economics, this is exactly what justifies things like capitalist penetration of the environment. Our Quotes evidence indicates this makes environmental destruction inevitable. Our Jordarian evidence indicates what happens in these particular forms of predictions is that we justify the creation of bloated bureaucracy, things like in the Endangered Species Act, for example, that ultimately cannot respond to the complexity of the environment. Our alternative evidence indicates that only doing nothing, allowing the waiting the environment to disclose itself to us is capable of recognizing the complexity of this environment and resisting any will to imposition on the earth that justifies environmental destruction. Subpoint C is our Dreyfus evidence. Even if they win short-term solvency in this particular scenario in the Endangered Species Act or the Clean Water Act, our evidence indicates that in the long term, this will ultimately justify total technocratic control, which will make environmental destruction inevitable, which literally means it's try or die for the negative. They've also considered ecosystem link, which indicates this ecosystem is not true, and all of it is rather a scientific creation, which means they can't access any of their biodiversity claims. This is conceded in the 1AR. They've also conceded our rehabilitation and restoration link arguments, which were all read in the 2 and C. These are all specific to their particular forms of evidence. Our evidence indicates that the rehabilitation and restoration, i.e. think through things like wetlands, are all done for human benefit, for things like future consumption. This is a reason why they will inevitably justify destruction of the environment. They've also conceded our Connolly evidence which indicates that there's still retained 2 residual dispatch. The permutation. Subpoint A is mastery. Subpoint B is sovereignty. Our evidence indicates that mastery of the environment gets articulated through like sovereign control, i.e. things like state solutions, which is another reason why the permutation is doomed to fail. Top of the debate. They agreed the 2 arguments about why we wait too long. This is the evidence that has absolutely no warrant. This is the clowning that Blake gave to Jennings in the cross-sex evidence does not say anything of the sort. It has literally no warrant. They've conceded that you should not evaluate any of their Clean Water Act specific to claims because it is informed by a particular scientific conception that is neither objective or neutral. Evidence indicates this is informed by capitalist control, which allows the maintenance of things like clean water only for capitalist control, which they have conceded justifies it seems. They conceded this Zimmerman evidence, which is read in the 1AR, which indicates that this capitalist control of the environment will result in extinction, which easily outweighs the entirety of the case. Now with the fiat durable debate, they've conceded that doing nothing is waiting. They cannot get this argument is so stupid that they've conceded that we have durable solvency, which means they can still access all of their offense. They can read things like reasons why the state is key, for example. This is that we would not spike out of these arguments. However, they've conceded that our evidence literally says that doing nothing is the waiting. This is what allows the environment to disclose itself to us. But they've conceded solves the entirety of their case. Any risk of a link argument means that you should vote for us. This grand evidence they read might look rhetorically powerful, but it does not have a warrant about why our alternative doesn't solve. It just says that sometimes Heideggerians wake up and nothing has changed. However, if we win the specificity of our solvency claims, this evidence should not matter. This evidence is not about the plan either, which is the reason why you should evaluate the specificity of our alternative. And our link arguments, they go for their Hatab evidence. Remember, they've conceded that this Hatab evidence doesn't say anything about engaging in politics to solve the environment. This evidence just says that sometimes agonism is good. Remember, they've conceded that we do not deny agonism. They've also conceded the ontology question, which we should extend now, which indicates that we do not preclude all political action, but the ontology question has to come first because it ultimately informs the political action we would take, which means if we win any of our link arguments, this is ultimately the ontology that informs the plan, which would ultimately justify environmental destruction. They say we should not revert away from technology. They try to extend our Gildor evidence group. These claims, they've conceded that we have more recent link evidence on the Luke debate. They've conceded that their Luke evidence just says that maybe sometimes institutions have to act, but we have specific arguments from Luke that are more recent, that are specific to their plan, which indicate that in this particular instance, these institutional actions is not good. And they've conceded that we do not deny institutional action, but we ultimately have to engage in an ontological questioning before that institutional action, which is the reason why you should vote for our alternative. They've conceded that we have evidence about rehabilitation and restoration, which are much more specific specific to the claim, which is the reason why you should prefer it. Now, if you argue that they extend their barrier evidence to read another piece of still evidence about why doing nothing ultimately doesn't solve this barrier evidence is not a better alternative at all. This evidence indicates that we have to associate economics. Our evidence indicates that as long as you associate economics and infuse economics, that you will justify capitalist control of the environment. They've conceded the evidence for the one in our cruelest evidence, which indicates that these representations of the environment, i.e. that we have to associate economics, ultimately means that we only retain the environment so we can consume it for our own benefit, which dooms any of the plan's solvency. It also dooms permutation. They say that language is not key. Our evidence is not about a language criticism, but rather the way that you think about the environment. This is the ontological question. If we win any of our link arguments, this is the reason why they ultimately justify the destruction of nature. They've conceded our Rogers evidence extended now, which indicates that they ultimately act as a force multiplier. This is a link magnification argument, i.e. that if they respond to a particular instance, they now apply to themselves as the creditor rather than the debtor, which means they have to continually act in the environment. This is impacted by our Dreyfus evidence, which indicates it leads to total technocratic control. This is impacted in extinction by our Zimmerman evidence. They say management is inevitable. They concede our alternative evidence, which indicates that we cannot plan in uniqueness to this question. They concede that we have the durability of fiat, and that allowing the environment to disclose ourselves to us is the only way that we can risk management. They've conceded the one in our evidence, 1, 2, and C evidence, which indicates that it is management that has put us on the brink of extinction in the first place, which means that it is literally try or die. They extend their sole evidence about why reverting away from technology is bad. Just to group these claims, they've conceded that ultimately multinational corporations only happen in a world of the affirmative because the environment is preserved precisely for those multinational corporations, which means that you justify capitalist control, which turns the entirety of the affirmative. They make another technology argument. This is answered above. They say that we cannot come up with a new way of thinking. I've already explained this argument above. I already answered the permutation. They think their Bowman evidence. They think this Bowman evidence indicates that they begin from the premise that we can control the lane, which obviously means that they have an inevitability claim. They concede this argument is not objective or neutral. They extend their method arguments. They concede our Kurosawa evidence is doomed to fail. Our evidence indicates their predictions are ultimately doomed to fail because it justifies bloated bureaucracy, which will always result in distinction of the environment. They read a piece of Zimmerman evidence. The bottom evidence has literally no warrant. You should refer to our ontological criticism, which indicates that we have to, it informs policy actions because we are prerequisite to the plan.
520.